What is up, everyone? It is Tuesday afternoon. I am back from the stadium for week one of organized team activities. The Bills had 70 plus players in attendance. We're able to run through a practice. We got to be out there for a little bit over an hour. So we're going to dive into a little bit of that. This is the Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast, joined as always by my co-host Ryan Talbot. I am Matt Parrino. And Ryan, we got to give everybody a little bit of a refresher here. We did these reaction podcasts last year after practice and training camp, and there's similar guidelines in place this time around. There's certain things we can't report, like, which players lined up where and with what team and what type of drill they were running. And so it kind of narrows the topics of conversation. But funny enough, I think that there's plenty to dive into here just with who was in attendance and who wasn't today.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to bring it to everyone's attention that obviously, we're very interactive. We have a lot of fan questions. There are going to be certain things that Matt simply cannot answer because of the guidelines in place. But as you said, pretty good attendance, 70 plus players, but there's also a little bit to talk about in terms of who wasn't there.
Yeah, definitely. And, we started off this morning with the press conference with Sean McDermott, and I was eager. I actually asked him about Star Lotulelei because, when he finally does get back inside the building, that's going to be, a very newsworthy topic. This is a guy that just based on off-season maneuvering here, moves that have been made, moves that haven't been made, there's a lot of, faith, a lot of trust and expectation for Star Lotulelei. And so I asked Sean McDermott, did he report and what are those expectations? And Sean basically said, unfortunately, Star Lotulelei isn't here. And he was one of 10 players that weren't in attendance today at OTAs. We can get into all those players. I think Star was one of the big ones. Devin Singletary, third-year running back, was not in attendance. And then if we want to go through each position group, Taiwan Jones, veteran, wasn't there. A lot of vets. Darrell Williams, offensive line. Mitch Morse, Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison, Obata was there. Vernon Butler, and there was one more. I don't have it off the top of my head. But we'll get into that list in a little while. I wanted to focus at the top here with Star. And, I wish I would have followed up on the question, to be honest with you. I had two questions lined up for Sean, and when he answered the question about Star, I quickly transitioned to Cody Ford. But I would have liked to have dove into that a little bit more with him, because that, to me, how they've structured the defensive line, they haven't really brought in a lot of competition at that one technique spot. I know that, Harrison Phillips is a guy that's played it. Vernon Butler's played it. I mean, heck, they've had Ed Oliver play it. I think that there's a lot of versatility, that they expect, and they go into a season, being ready to utilize. But Lotulelei being there is a big deal. Him not being there right now after a year outside of football, I get that he's a veteran. I get that he's been through many of these before. But I think just like, Sean has talked about the, emphasizing the team building part of this thing. And, there's plenty of players now that, there's some players that he has played with the Carolina connection, and obviously the Bills players as well. But, Eric Washington back in the mix, some newer, younger players that, this team's got to bring along a little bit. I was a little bit surprised that Lotulelei wasn't there, just to maybe knock some rust off here. But it'll be interesting to see as this thing goes along in terms of, mini camp, mandatory mini camp. Because that's another thing about this, Ryan. OTAs are completely voluntary, and there's teams around the league. I mean, we saw those notes going out, statements going out around the league about, players coming together and saying we want to just continue to do this virtual off season. We didn't see a big drop off last year. So, that's definitely a thought process here in a lot of locker rooms. But 70 plus players show up here. And I guess just from a, fan perspective, maybe there's some frustration with Lotulelei when he was playing, after missing a year. I can understand some of the consternation, if you will, that Lotulelei is not in the building to start OTAs.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. It's optional. You don't have to be here. A lot of the players that are not that were not present today are veterans, guys that have been in this league for a long time. Your Jerry Hugheses, your Mario Addisons, your Mitch Morses, your Darrell Williams, so on and so forth. The list goes on and on. But he also missed all of last season. He opted out. He had every right to do so. He had good reason to do so. But this is someone that has not played a snap in well over 1 year. So to come back in, to get acclimated, to introduce himself to a lot of new teammates, players that he did not maybe meet last year, players that they have added this year, and listen, he's done this. He's been in the game for a long time, but the Bills did not address the one technique, not in the draft, not really in free agency. They added some players that have the versatility to play one tech, three tech, but they didn't add a true run stuffer into the mix in the draft, which a lot of mock drafts leading up to this year's draft saw them do. So there's no one really waiting in the wings to benefit from those snaps. Yes, Harrison Phillips, but he's been in the league now long enough where he knows what he's doing. If there was a rookie waiting in the wings that would have taken those snaps here, I'd be like, hey, I'm all for it. At least this young guy is getting those snaps. It's not the case. It would be nice of him to have shown up after taking a year off, but at the same time, he has every right not to be here at this time because it is an optional event.
Yeah, Nathan Jennings, he mentions, wouldn't they be keeping tabs on players in the offseason? And for sure, like I'm not suggesting that, that there's been any type of, lack of conditioning and training and all those kinds of things. I just think that this is a big, a moment, a chance to kind of get a competitive advantage. And we know that the philosophy in the building there. And, listen, at the end of the day, Starr is a veteran, and despite being out for a year, I do kind of understand from that on the opposite side of the coin why maybe a veteran player like that would choose to skip OTAs. They've been through this before. I think training camp is going to be very important for that group to kind of come together and gel. So I can kind of get it. On the other side of the ball, Devin Singletary, a guy that, has been in the conversation all offseason long amongst Bills Mafia, just because of, the polarizing nature of his tenure, his 2-year run now. Obviously had that big mistake in the AFC Championship game, the drop pass that, probably could have gone for a touchdown. He might be still running. I know we make that joke all the time. He had nothing but open field, to transitioning to the offseason conversation about, do the Bills need to add a home run threat? Maybe add somebody with more speed. And then you get to OTAs, kind of doing the attendance. Devin Singletary is not there. And so this to me was probably the biggest eye popper. I mean, he doesn't fit into that veteran pool of players. This is a third-year guy. I believe the only guy from his draft class that wasn't at OTAs, hadn't reported yet. And who knows, maybe he will show up before too long. Maybe he's, his training schedule away from the building. Maybe there's some type of timing with that. And maybe the Bills we didn't get to talk to Sean about that. Maybe the Bills wanted him doing wherever he is and whatever he's doing. But yeah, definitely an eyebrow raiser that Singletary wasn't out there.
Yeah, and again, he could show up any day now. He could show up this week, next week, whatever the case may be. But to not be there on the first day, I get why some fans would be upset with that, especially, again, after the Bills did not address the running back position in this year's draft. They're going into this season saying, okay, we trust Zach Moss coming off of a pretty serious injury. We trust Devin Singletary, who has a rookie tied for the league lead average in terms of yards per carry. Mind you, didn't have the workload of a Derrick Henry by any means, but still performed. Then he had a little bit of a down year last year. They trust the Antonio Williams. They trust maybe the Christian Wades, and obviously the Breidas of the world, someone that they did sign in free agency. So you would like to see all of those guys in here working with one another, getting their snaps, seeing how they all look. But without Singletary in the mix, knowing that Zach Moss still isn't a complete go, it probably gave everyone in attendance a chance to get their first look at Matthew Breida. It probably gave some of those younger guys, the Williams of the world, the not so young guy and Christian Wade, but someone still, young in terms of football years, not playing for a long time, some more snaps there. So maybe that will benefit them long term.
Yeah, Zach Moss was there. He was one of 3 Bills players in red non-contact jerseys. Cody Ford still coming back from the leg injury. They're taking him slow, obviously. Isaiah Hodgins also, guy who missed all of last season. They're still bringing him back slow. He was participating though, so that was you got to see him play a little bit. Again, we can't really get into where they played, so that's something that I'm going to keep saying over the course of the next couple weeks. Because I know a lot of fans are going to be like, "Man, this is kind of vague." Like, can I know a little bit more about what they did, where they did it, as we start to try to put these, pieces together. And, we just really can't do it. Those are the Bills media guidelines. So obviously Matt Breida, the first look at him today, listen, I think he's going to fit right in here. I mean, that's my observation, if you will. I can't get into the details of what he did and where or where he played. And again, the 11-on-11 stuff today, there wasn't a ton of it. And so I think that this was one of the first few practices. They put out a video yesterday. I still think they're running through a lot of different things, getting guys up to speed, installing a lot of things, a lot of young players. Even after rookie minicamp, the attendance there was really good. But, just getting used to being on the field together and going through all those kinds of things. But I thought that, Matt Breida looked, I in the note I sent over to you, he looked as quick as advertised. He looked engaged. And this is a guy like in Breida that he's such a luxury to have. Like, you got Antonio Williams, who you saw a very limited sample size from last year that, okay, we want to develop this guy, right? You have, draft assets that you spent in Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. Now you have that veteran who, I think offers a little bit something different than TJ Yeldon that the Bills can maybe look to utilize in a matchup specific way. And I think that maybe TJ Yeldon's problem so much over the last 2 years in terms of trying to get on the field is he didn't have that part of his game that separated him from the group as much as a Matt Breida does. Now, I will say this, Ryan. You know who I think Matt Breida's main competition might end up being?
Who's that?
I think it's going to be Christian Wade. So I had a conversation with Christian Wade about a week ago, and we got to reschedule the interview because the audio file. I love when this happens. It's just it didn't work. Like I went to play it, there was no audio. I don't know what happened. So I obviously no story came out of it, but I got to talking to him about what this process has been like, and we're going to redo the interview at some point over the next few weeks, and I hope to write a story and have more on it. But he's not treating. I know he's got this third year of the International Pathway Program where he can come in here and continue to kind of learn. I think that there's a sense of confidence that he's coming in here to compete for a job, and I guess that's always been the mindset. Like when you talk to him over the course of the time, especially in year two. But I really am curious to see how far along he's come, and I think that there's a confidence in him in the building more so than there ever has been. I think that he's earned that respect. And, as fun as it was to see Breida out there today and moving around and maybe a guy with that kind of dimension, if you're talking about that speed home run ability, I think that's Christian Wade. Like, that's kind of what he showed off the last time we saw him in 2019 in the preseason. Yeah,
when it comes to Christian Wade, the International Pathway Program is giving him that third-year option, but you have to also realize he just turned 30 years old. I think this is the do-or-die year for him with the Bills. Either he shows enough this offseason to make this roster, or maybe the Bills say, listen, we're going to let you go and see if you can maybe find a job elsewhere just because you're 30. I know there's not a lot of tread off the tires, so to speak, but at the same time, 30 in the NFL for a running back, that's up there. So you need to let him, see if maybe he can land somewhere else. I don't know if they would keep him on that International Pathway Program, extra practice squad player for another year. I mean, they have every right to, and it won't count against them. They could keep him as that extra man. But just from the fact that he came over here, the fact that he's learned the NFL game now for 3 years, maybe they would let him go. But yeah, both Christian Wade and Matt Breida have that extra gear that the Bills did not have last year in a TJ Yeldon. They don't have in a Devin Singletary or a Zach Moss. So it gives them a chance. It gives them a chance to be involved in the mix. And I think Breida specifically is going to come in with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because he's someone that in the 49ers, he did thrive when he was given the ball in terms of yard per carry average, in terms of making the most of his carries. So when he was added to the Dolphins roster last year, I think a lot of people had high expectations saying he's going to be the workhorse. He's going to be the number one guy. And it just never happened. When he was given opportunities, it just didn't work out. And then he was passed over for Myles Gaskin, an undrafted free agent. And then he was, or a late round pick maybe. And then it was Selvin Ahmad, and another one who was added as an undrafted free agent. So it didn't work out in Miami after a promising start with the 49ers. So now he wants to probably come to Buffalo and show, listen, I wasn't utilized in Miami. I can still play in this league. I can play at a high level. And with the Bills, he's going to have a shot to show that off because he does bring something different from a skill set perspective than the Zach Mosses of the world and the Devin Singletaries of the world.
Morse and Darrell Williams weren't there today, but man, just getting a chance to look at the entire, rest of the roster along the offensive line. And, it really is a nice reminder and preview of Liam asking about Dane Jackson. We're going to talk about Dane Jackson in a moment. But this offensive line is just absolutely stocked with talent. And, everywhere you look, I mean, for most of the practice, John Feliciano was kind of standing off to the side. A lot of the younger players were able to kind of get some run here today. And that's another thing we could talk about too, is like, you look at guys like Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes not showing up. What does that mean? And listen, they're vets. I'd have to go back to 2019 OTAs and look at my notes, but I don't think Jerry Hughes was there that year either. Somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, if you can recall off the top of your head. But that gives opportunities to younger guys. I mean, AJ Epinesa, we heard Sean McDermott spoke about him today, and he said physically, the way that he showed up to camp, he's ready to go. He looks great. He looks like he's ready to hit the ground running. This could be a huge year for AJ Epinesa to play in a role where, who knows, maybe at some point he earns like a starter job opposite Jerry Hughes. I don't know how that's all going to play out. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, it was really tough to see kind of where everybody was. But I think as we get to training camp, cool note for everybody also, I know I'm moving all over the place. Sean McDermott was asked about Rochester, St. John Fisher, and they are talking to St. John Fisher, as Mike Catalana reported a couple weeks ago, and that could still be in play. They're working through it. They sent some people out from the Bills to Rochester to kind of go over some potential protocol issues. But man, if that's the case, that's going to be the key to unlocking these post-practice podcasts, because once the fans are allowed back at practice, I think that we'll be able to talk a lot more in detail about all of this. But just a guy like AJ Epinesa, Greg Rousseau, Boogie Basham, and even a guy like Daryl Johnson, who is going to be fighting for his roster life this upcoming summer. I mean, they added in huge numbers, and Daryl Johnson is directly on the roster bubble, if not on the wrong end of it right now. So I think that these kinds of opportunities, these kinds of reps that Sean has talked so much about, they're so valuable, even when those veterans don't show up, because of that many more reps that other players are going to get.
Yeah, both sides of the line. You mentioned offensive line first and foremost. No Mitch Morse, no Darrell Williams. Well, they just drafted two monsters at 6'8", so that means they're probably getting some run at some point at that tackle spot. They drafted another lineman who could be playing on the interior. They have some younger players along that line. They obviously have a lot of young players that have been in the mix and made the 53-man roster, albeit not starting. That's getting them more reps. So on the offensive side of the ball, that's great news. It gives those players opportunities to show what they can do. It helps Brandon Beane, and not so much in OTAs, but it gives them a little bit of a start, because Brandon Beane's going to have a tough job in terms of figuring out who's going to make this roster on both sides of the ball, offensive line, defensive line. So the more reps that these younger guys, these inexperienced players, the ones that aren't starting, get, the better it is for him in terms of figuring out who's going to make this roster, who could be a potential player that we could trade away, so on and so forth. Defensive line, I'm all for those veterans taking that time off. They've earned that. And even, Star Lotulelei, despite having the year off, I get it. So you're getting, again, you're letting the Boogie Bashams and the Greg Rousseaus of the world get their opportunities. But you mentioned it, AJ Epinesa, Sean McDermott raved about how he looked in terms of where the Bills wanted him to be at, how he is. He's had a year in the system now. I feel like AJ Epinesa has almost become the forgotten man, which is kind of funny to say because he's only a second-year player, but the Bills go and they draft defensive ends back-to-back in this year's draft. They have Jerry Hughes. They have Mario Addison. They sign F.A. Obata. And then you have AJ Epinesa. Poor AJ Epinesa, who had to go through the strangest offseason in NFL history as a rookie last year, being Buffalo's technically their first pick because the first-round pick was Stephon Diggs. So Epinesa has no traditional offseason. He doesn't really get to work one-on-one with the defensive line coach or any of the coaches in general. They get him in when they finally do, and they want him to cut weight and to get down to a certain playing weight. So his whole rookie season is a bit of a wash in terms of by the end of the year, yeah, he's where they want him to be, but that's not how it started. So now he comes in, he's where they want him to be. He has a year in the system. He knows the playbook. He's getting these opportunities in OTAs. All of this could lead to a breakout big season for AJ Epinesa.
Speaking of a big season potentially, Dane Jackson. I know there's the Dane Jackson hive that's out there that's super excited for that cornerback competition. Made himself a big play today. Picked off a ball. It was a really nice play. I think it was Isaiah Hodgins was the intended receiver from Josh Allen, and Dane Jackson with a beautiful interception. Got some hoots and hollers from the sideline celebrating with them. Big play for him. But listen, this isn't surprising. I mean, this is a guy in Dane Jackson that's now kind of made his name on coming in and making plays when his number is called. So it's almost like when they run these plays now, the expectation is going to be that Dane Jackson makes some plays. I think it's, we spent so much time talking about the potential cornerback options and will they still bring a potential cornerback in? Yeah, man. I don't know. We talked a little bit about it on the last show. We were talking about Steven Nelson and what that would look like if they brought him in to compete. I really think this depth chart, by the time we get to training camp, Bills fans are going to be really happy with it. From, Levi Wallace, who has all this experience at the position, all these starts, and the guy that, I always bang the drum, but Cam Lewis is a guy that's going to be in the mix everywhere you look when it comes to training camp. It's a big year for him too. Year 3, a guy that, had a cup of coffee in camp year 1. Last year got the call to replace Taron Johnson, got hurt. So now he gets to come in this year and maybe silence some of those, critics who are saying that he can't stay healthy. If he can stay healthy and be in the mix, that's another guy to push, some other guys here. That I like the competition that's already in place here. Just having a chance today to look out on the field and kind of see it up close and personal.
Yeah, first and foremost, Dane Jackson. Go back to Brandon Beane's interview on the PFF podcast with Chris Collinsworth, with Richard Sherman. He was asked for a breakout player, and he stopped short of saying breakout player or, who's a potential superstar. I can't remember exactly how the question was phrased, but he said Dane Jackson's a guy that maybe doesn't have the measurables, maybe doesn't have the speed that you look for, the athleticism, but he's just always out there making plays. And then, we did see that in his rookie season. He gets put in the Seattle game, and the first snap, they throw right at him. He's one-on-one in coverage against DK Metcalf. It's a quick screen pass. What does he do? He wraps up Metcalf by the ankles, tackles him immediately. He gets one-on-one against DeAndre Hopkins in that Arizona game. Pass defense in the end zone, beautiful breakup. Interception against the Jets. He made play after play after play when called upon. That's all you can ask for. He can't go out there and suddenly become a 4-3, 4-4 guy. He can't go in there and grow an extra inch or two, but he can go and make plays. And he showed it as a rookie that he could do it last year. He's showing it again early here in OTAs, making a play on day 1, where maybe Brandon Beane will sit there and say, hey, we don't need necessarily to go out and sign a Steven Nelson or some of these other talented veterans out there on the market, because there are talented players out there waiting in the wings. He has to build on it. He has to keep doing this day in, day out, obviously. But you do have him. You do have Levi Wallace. I love the fact that you mentioned Cam Lewis, because he was finally getting inserted into that starting lineup for Taron Johnson, who, kudos to Taron Johnson, turned it around after that point. Maybe that was the wake-up call that he needed, because all of a sudden he started making more plays after Lewis's injury. We saw a few pick sixes, obviously, regular season playoffs. So there's competition across the board. There's versatility. They add a rookie in the draft at the cornerback position. They add a safety. So that secondary has a good mix already of veteran talent and some young players in the fold. So maybe the Bills do avoid that altogether.
Josh Allen was asked in his first press conference today about what he's been working on this offseason. And because, obviously the big storyline this time last year was the deep throws and how he was going to improve. And obviously, I think he ranked among the league's best in terms of downfield throwing accuracy in 2020, which surprised a lot of people. And he said that he's been working on a lot of in-breaking routes this offseason. Here's his direct quote that he had from today. That's something that maybe wasn't my strongest suit last year. The deep ends and the short 5-yard under is just making sure I'm putting it in a catchable spot for these guys to catch and run. That's going to be a huge asset for us to be able to hit those type of throws and allow our guys to stay up and stay on the move. I didn't do a good enough job with that last year, so excited to continue to work on that with the guys here. And, that's something that jumped out to me for a couple of reasons, because we're now at the stage of Josh Allen's career where he's really able to just fine tune some of the really minute details of his game. You know what I mean? And, in breaking routes, I mean, that's a very big part of what they want to do. But ball placement, like specific ball placement, like things that he saw last year that he could take in with the offseason workload with Jordan Palmer out in California and really just hone in on that and work on it every day. We've seen he has like almost like, I can't think of another case of a quarterback who's improved so drastically on something specifically year to year that they worked on specifically to do. I mean, you take some of that short yardage stuff even too. In year 2, that was a huge improvement. Like, remember his rookie year when, I go back to his first training camp when he was airmailing little, wide receiver hitches out of the backfield and some of those training camp videos. And he comes into year 2, and I think he was one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the league, under 10 yards as a second-year player. Then he had to fix the downfield stuff. So there's so much, that you can do once you have all of these big boxes checked. Now we're sitting here talking about Josh Allen, year 4, really just ironing in on the details.
Yeah, every year Josh Allen focuses in on an area, and every year he improves on it. I do remember before last season, Jordan Palmer saying, after the Texans lost, before even COVID hit, yeah, I think Josh Allen's going to be one of the best deep ball passers in the league next year, knowing full well that that's what Allen was going to focus on. And sure enough, improved significantly. Obviously, a lot of that had to do with the work they did with Palmer, the work in terms of bringing someone in to look at how he was moving, the foot movement, the shoulder movement, all of that pre-throw and his motion, and that played a big role in it. But you mentioned it. After his rookie year, he wanted to work on that short intermediate stuff. It wasn't just airmailing players. When he was connecting with some of them, he was rifling that ball in, breaking fingers almost, so to speak, with the velocity he was putting on it. So
he still has a little bit of an issue with that, according to Gabriel Davis.
Yeah, a little bit, but he always improves in these areas. So improve in that area, because the Bills are one of the most pass happy offenses in the NFL. So if he can go in there and he can work on those 5-7 yard routes and complete passes at that range on the first play of each drive, you're talking 2nd and 3, 2nd and 5. That makes it that much easier to move the chains, to sustain drives. And as great as a 70-yard deep ball for a touchdown is, in the NFL, you need to be able to sustain drives, keep defenses on the field, tire them out. But also for your own offense, in terms of maybe keeping a team like the Kansas City Chiefs off the field. Those high-scoring offenses that you will go against at times this year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So sustain those drives, put up points at the end of the drives, and that's one way to do it. Make sure that you are accurate on those 5 to 7 yard routes. Continue to impress in the intermediate routes, and then obviously, as we've already seen, get better and better on those deep throws. So Josh Allen, it keeps working on those little areas each year to make sure that he is a complete all-around quarterback.
Got our first look at Mitchell Trubisky today as well. I see a lot of people in the comment section. Nathan Jennings, our good buddy Matthew Harmon. Hit that like button if you're watching us on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button too if this is your first time here. Every time the Bills practice this offseason, Ryan and I will be live to discuss it and talk about whatever we can talk about because this is exciting. I just saw Tom Pelissaro, a tweet from him, that the NFL had one of its virtual meetings, off-season meetings today, and informed clubs that fans are expected to be back at training camp. 30 of 32 NFL teams have already been approved to have full stadiums. I believe that was the quote. Let me just double check it here because nothing would be worse than that. Live commenting. Let's see here.
Well, while Matt's looking that up, I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Josh Allen even said today one of the first things that they did was work with crowd noise. And it's important because they went throughout most of the season last year without that, and I think it benefited the Bills. But then you get to the AFC Championship game. They're on the road. Kansas City has not a full stadium in terms of capacity, but a lot of fans there, really loud. The Bills had some issues in terms of maybe their timing in terms of when they wanted to get the snap off. So this is going to be important because not just away games, but even home games now are going to be most likely filled maybe to capacity or close to it. And it's something that you have to readjust to. So go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so the tweet is about particularly training camp. So attendance, the expectation is to have all 32 teams having attendance back at their facilities. And listen, a lot of teams do it at their own facilities. There's still a handful of teams around the league that go away. I know we went down to Spartanburg for the Carolina joint practices. That was a fun time. They do all of theirs on the campus there. And so I know that, Sean McDermott was asked again today, and he did not shy away from that answer that he said before, where he likes going down to St. John Fisher for that short amount of time. It's a team building opportunity. They got to make sure that it's safe. So it's going to follow local and state guidelines. So we'll see how that plays out. We're still got a couple months until that needs to happen. And so really, really good news. There's a question here about Harrison Phillips that I want to get to here. What is your opinion on what will happen with Harrison Phillips? And listen, this is a huge year for him. And I kind of puffed out my chest a little bit today when Sean McDermott was talking about Harrison Phillips, because he echoed something that I talked about, because having conversations, virtually last season, but about Harrison Phillips and, what it meant to come back from that injury. The expectation should have been tempered from the very start of last season. It's a serious injury. Guys usually aren't, he probably was 65% of himself last season, even at, his best. And I don't think he ever wanted to make excuses, but I think that was a big part of it. So to get in the training facility, he was been in there all off season. Sean McDermott kind of said that today. We got him back here. He looks healthy. He looks ready to go. So, yeah, this is a big year. I don't expect any limitations on Harrison Phillips, and I think that he factors in. Listen, he's important. He's got that versatility. He can really, truly play that one technique role. And if you go back to that Cincinnati Bengals game, that couple games there where he was really getting his feet wet, that's where I feel like he was trending. So, in a lot of ways, he's star Lotulelei insurance. I mean, if Phillips doesn't have a great camp and great preseason, and he's on the roster bubble, and there's questions about Lotulelei, I really fear for where the Bills are in terms of that one technique spot.
Yeah, the fact that the Bills didn't draft a true one technique or maybe add a premier player in free agency, I think that's great news for Harrison Phillips. The fact that he was there all offseason, it just kind of showed his commitment, I'm sure, to that coaching staff, to that front office. They obviously love Harrison Phillips. He was one of their first picks in terms of where they drafted him. They've seen what he can do when he's healthy. Like you said, last year expectations should have been tempered coming back from a serious injury, but now he is healthy. He is back. Go all the way back to Greg Rousseau's introduction to the Bills in terms of the video footage that they put out there. Who did he talk to, or who kind of came in and said, hey, when you having the veteran dinner? It was Harrison Phillips. So he's been there. He said, if you need anything, reach out. He's going to be a good asset to these younger players. But more importantly, he is a good player on the field when healthy. I think you're going to see that this year. And with Star Lotulelei, some question marks there about missing an entire year, some rust that may need to be shaken off. You could see Phillips maybe getting more snaps early on in the season than maybe some expected, just because of who knows how long it's going to take until we see Star Lotulelei in terms of where he was and what he was doing before he opted out in terms of 2020.
I know. Let's wrap this up here. I know that this is a pretty divisive topic. I mean, it came up several times today throughout all the press conferences, vaccinations and what that means. I mean, if you dial this thing all the way back to Josh Allen's comments on the Kyle Brand podcast, this is something that, it's a very personal thing. It's a very contentious thing, like especially when it starts happening on social media, whether to or not get a vaccine for COVID-19. And it's going to continue to be a big topic in training camps and off-season programs. And as we move into the regular season, and, Sean was asked about it today, and, what this process was like, because one of the big things with the NFLPA coming back is the uncertainty of coming back in a team environment where there's, a little bit looser, rules and guidelines. Sean McDermott said they're almost, he would guess somewhere between 60 and 70% back to normal. Well, if you're throwing in a collection of guys that are vaccinated and some that aren't, is there concerns there for the players that are vaccinated and the staff that are vaccinated? There's all these things that are going to come up. And so Sean was asked about it today, and that was like a big piece of the press conference. And then Josh Allen was asked about it, and Tremaine Edmonds was asked about it. And both players opted not to say where they stood, whether or not they got vaccinated. But I want to talk about one thing from this, because you fast forward to the regular season, right? And right now we're sitting in a spot as a country where things are really looking up. I mean, around the country, CDC guidance is calling for mask removal outdoors. It's a lot of places indoors. I mean, I'm at Starbucks, I'm at Wegmans. People are going maskless pretty much everywhere you look. It feels like we're trending back to normal. But when you get into the thick of the season, and we're talking about some of the things that you want to do, and also just avoiding an outbreak, that's where I think Sean McDermott, that's where his stance has kind of been placed on all of this. Vaccinations, whatever you think about it, getting vaccinated or giving like a large number of players vaccinated is going to set them up to fight this thing off and avoid any type of catastrophe in the season. Because Ryan, go back to last season when this thing was first starting back in training camp, and you remember all the false positives that day where Josh Allen missed a couple days because of tests that came back negative. We're much further along in the process than that, so I don't think that you're as fearful of that. But just thinking about all the potential roadblocks to the success for a season that has so much expectations, that's where I think this is going to continue to be a storyline that's covered. I know there's a lot of fans asking about why are these questions continuing to be asked, because it's a big topic, not only nationally, but globally. And I know that it's football, and I understand the concept, the idea that I want to go to football, like I want to read about football or listen to football, and I just want to talk about that. I get that. But some people are interested in it, and there's a big collection of people that are interested, and I think that's why this is going to continue to be a topic. Yeah,
it's going to continue to be a topic for the foreseeable future. And Sean McDermott said it well. We can educate the players on it. We can answer their questions. A few weeks ago, maybe it was last week, we saw Cole Beasley make a rare appearance on Twitter, and he was talking about it, and he said a few times, I truly am asking these questions. I'm not sure. So there are players that probably need to get up to speed on that. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to change a stance. Obviously, with the FDA looking at making these, looking at these in terms of they were emergency approvals, but making them a full-time thing, that could obviously help in terms of convincing players to get it done. So there's a lot to it there. So when all is said and done there, it could help them in terms of passing the approval, and then players obviously making that choice or maybe swaying their opinion on where they are now. So I think a lot of players are going to keep it in-house. I don't think you're going to hear a lot of players come right out and say that they do or do not have it. I almost lost my train of thought there because you had a guest there. She is so stinking cute and adorable. I started rambling, and I kind of veered back on where I was going with it. But yeah, so in time, players are going to get the education that they potentially need, and then they'll make those decisions. But you're right. There's lofty expectations for the Bills this season. And when all is said and done, I'm sure Sean McDermott wants to get them leaning in the other direction, that is getting that vaccine. But all he can do is educate. He can't force the topic because you don't want to lead to any issues in that locker room.
Yeah, so mommy is at her second graduation in as many days. My wife got her second master's degree, just finishing up this semester. So she's at her graduation right now. And so I have the little ones, and I don't know what they've been doing for the last 40 minutes. So I'm going to walk upstairs, and hopefully everything is good. I can't believe that we made it this long without you coming down. You're such a good girl. Yes, you are. All right, I'll be right up. Go see Lukey, okay? Be right up. All right, everyone. That is going to do it for this episode. Thank you, Matthew Harmon. Keep it locked on to Syracuse.com, NewYorkUpstate.com. We'll have coverage all week long from today's practice, the press conferences today, and then also there will be one practice per week during OTAs. That's kind of the agreed upon deal every year, going back to when things were normal. And so we'll be back out, I believe, next Tuesday. We'll wait for guidance on the Bills, but keep it locked on here. Make sure you have the notification set, because as this thing goes along and the practices get a little bit more detailed, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about some of these not so much where people are lining up, but maybe some of the, plays that happen here when we get more of it and get into some of the matchups, and that'll be super fun. I'm so excited to watch some of these one-on-ones as well. I don't know if we'll get them in mandatory mini camp. It's like, again, we're still learning all this stuff again because somebody said she has a solid point. Yeah, she does. She makes great points. So, we'll take you guys through all of the rest of this month on our way to mini camp. It's been so much fun already. Thank you for making the rookie mini camp episode super successful on YouTube. Great stuff. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back next week. All right, take care, everyone.